When I talk about metaphors, I'm often just combining metaphors and similes together. They are different technically, but they perform roughly the same function. So a metaphor is a connection between something and something that appears at first to have nothing to do with that thing. Um, a simile is a statement that compares one thing to another using the term like or as. So they're very closely related. The beautiful thing about metaphors is you can make these leaps in logic and you can show connections that are not immediately obvious and also demonstrate a certain nuance. So if I'm trying to communicate something really complex that I feel like I'm struggling to find the words for, I'll often try to find a metaphor. Now, it's important that you find the right metaphor. So say you're talking about something that happened in your childhood, you're not going to say it happened in the summer. You probably wouldn't have a modern day winter metaphor or something like that. So you'll want something that sort of fits with the time and the place and all those kinds of things. But they can be really useful, metaphors can be, because they really can be surprising to the reader and they can really make connections with the reader. Loss is like touching cold metal outside in winter. Okay, so this is an interesting metaphor. Is loss anything like touching cold metal outside in winter? Not literally, but metaphorically. It hurts. It's painful in an unexpected way, and it seeps into your bones and stays there, and all of those things. And in this particular passage, it really connects to this ongoing metaphor that Laurie Misek has created, which is the metaphor of winter and waiting for the spring. And in the case of winter in her book, Laurie uses it as this time of intense grief and loss. And in the spring, she is able to come out of it to a certain degree. And it's like the winter is leaving her. So it's part of an ongoing metaphor. I have to include this because it's just such a clever, clever metaphor. I don't know if you've ever read Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. It's kind of a humorous approach to punctuation. It was quite famous when it came out years and years ago, maybe 20 years. Between the 16th century and the present day, the comma became a kind of scary grammatical sheepdog. It tears about on the hillside of language, endlessly organizing words into sensible groups and making them stay put, sorting and dividing, circling and herding, and of course darting off with a peremptory woof to round up any wayward subordinate clause that makes a futile bolt for semantic freedom. So very clever. I don't think I've ever come up with quite as clever of a metaphor as this one, but it certainly seems to bring this idea to life. It's a great way to talk about commas and to create a mental picture. This is from a not nonfiction book. Dylan Thomas is primarily known as a poet, but this is from his collection of short stories. I think he only has one collection of short stories. I really love them. They're very surreal. It's called Adventures in the Skin Trade, and this particular story is called The Orchards. He raised his pencil so that its shadow fell, a tower of wood and lead on the clean paper. He fingered the pencil tower, the half moon of his thumbnail rising and setting behind the leaden spire. The tower fell. Down fell the city of words, the walls of a poem, the symmetrical letters. Here's another one. I felt like an undeveloped photograph that he was printing, my image rising to the surface under his gaze. And here's one from Rudy Weeb's Of This Earth. Stories create feeling beyond reason or guilt. In story, we understand, even as we hear and sense it, that wind can be an image of the divine moving within us. When wind runs high in the crowded aspens, we see them bend their thin, pale bodies down again and again like homage, like worship, and we hear and see their flat-stemmed leaves shiver as they turn their whiteness into sighing, groaning together, the long sound of creation grieving. So in a lot of this book, there is a very strong spiritual theme, and the spiritual theme often moves into metaphor, and we see that in here. So you really want to avoid cliches in your writing. If you notice that you write something that kind of looks a bit like a cliche, or you kind of think you've heard it before, you probably want to get rid of it. Take another look at it and see if you can come up with something new. That's what we aspire to as writers, is creating fresh ways of experiencing the world, of communicating complex feelings and ideas and experiences in a way that connects with the reader.